This story happened slightly over 20 years ago, back when I was 16. During this time, I lived with my mum and stepdad in a remote area, 70 miles west of Las Vegas, Nevada. So I had gone out to visit my friends, being allowed to drive myself for the first time ever. I had a lovely time watching a movie and getting food together, until it was time for me to head home. The curfew I was given was 10 p.m. with a caveat that if I was running late for any reason, to find a payphone and call. The night wrapped up around me and my old 71 Chevy pickup, as there were no streetlights or houses for most of my way home. As I pulled up for the first two of the stop signs, I could see an older sedan. Old cars are still pretty common in that area. Stopped with its hazards on. I pulled up behind it and waited as a man in his 30s or 40s started walking towards me from the driver's side. Even at this point, I didn't have any alarm bells going off. Being in the middle of the desert, providing assistance to stranded people was pretty common here. People rapidly get into severe problems there, but not having enough water when a vehicle breaks down or not realizing that, well, it's a desert, people die wandering delirious away from the highway trying to find help. So it was pretty common to stop and help others. Anyhow, I rolled down my window and as he came abreast to my door, I could immediately smell the liquor on him. I could also see another man in the passenger seat, and as this was before anyone that I knew had cell phones, and the nearest payphone was like a good 10 minutes drive ahead, I didn't have a way to call the cops on a drunk driver immediately. But the man explained that his car stalled and asked if I could help them out. I asked if his car was a stick shift, which it was, so I asked if he was familiar with push-starting it. He said yes, so I agreed as gently as I could to push their car with my truck while they turned the engine over. For anyone that isn't familiar with this, it's a way to start a manual car that's having a battery or starter issue, specifically to get it somewhere to work on it. I knew my truck would be fine, and I didn't feel like it would be wise to get out and try and push their car physically. And push-starting the car worked without a hitch, but here's where things went south. They get back out and they thank me. Then they invite me to hang out and have some fun with them. I decline, obviously. They pull off to the side of the road and I continue on my way, but then they start following me. So here I am. It's really late. I'm running late because I stopped to help them. Admittedly, I hadn't given myself much leeway from leaving my friends, but these drunk, creepy older guys have started to follow me on a road without any man-made light, except for car headlights, and I'm at least 10 minutes away from any payphone. I think to myself, maybe I'm just being paranoid, so I turned down a road that I know gave me a couple of turn-offs to either head back to town or loop around to the gas station with a payphone. And the car follows directly behind me. I'm now thinking, crap, I could be in trouble, so I take another turn that only leads to a couple of houses at the end of the road, and they turn behind me. I take another turn to loop around back to head to the station, and they follow again, so at least I know now that they're definitely following me and not just heading home. At this point, my heart is pounding, and I decided to try something to lose them. I pull to the side of the road and I see them pull up behind me. I wait as the driver gets out of the car and begin walking towards me. His companion also gets out and starts walking towards me as well. I wait until they almost get to the tailgate, and then I floor it. My wheels dig into the rocks and flick dirt everywhere, causing a cloud behind me, and with the lead way, I head towards the gas station. When I get there, the gas station is deserted, but the payphone is showered in the light from the gas pumps. I call home and explain what happened and why I was running late. My stepdad asked if the gas station worker could be seen, and I let him know that I couldn't see him behind the counter. He was probably in the back. I wasn't in any trouble, but I was asked to hurry home, quickly. In the end, I got home safely, which I'm very thankful for. And while I don't know exactly what those two guys were up to, I'm pretty sure it was no good. In the summer of 2014, my band was on a semi-professional tour around the US. We started west and played through Salt Lake, Vegas, and also into California. We played in a couple of cities in CA before heading north towards Portland, OR. We played every night, and with such a demanding performance schedule, we would often need to drive our tour van through the night to make it to the next city in time. Luckily enough, our drummer and trombone player loved long-distance driving and would take the wheel almost every leg of the tour. The night after our show in Berkeley, we decided to drive the 10-hour trek to Portland overnight so we wouldn't have to deal with the day traffic. This journey involves driving up the I-5. So, it was late into the night when we crossed the Oregon state boundary. As is usual for road trips, we considered that a pit stop to gas up, use the bathroom, get snacks, etc., and everything was in order, and we looked up the gas stations on our GPS. Luckily, there was one coming up in a small town, and we crossed our fingers that it would be open. I apologize, but due to the rigorous tour schedule, lack of sleep, and day drinking at the time, I really don't remember the name of the town. However, I will say that I knew the name of the town when this all happened because I found it odd that it didn't show up on any highway mile markers. Well, we got to the gas station at around 2 or 3 in the morning, I think, and immediately felt like something was just off. The town was the type of tiny, rinky-dink rest stop towns that you're used to finding on road trips, but the only building with any lights on was the gas station. There were a number of other buildings, but honestly, they seemed dead. There was no illuminated storefront signs or any kind of activity. There was also no cars anywhere, and we of course chalk up the weirdness to the town being closed for the night, but it didn't help the immediately heebie-jeebiness that we all felt. Luckily though, the gas station was open, and we stopped the van to gas up. Some of us stayed in the van to sleep, while the rest went into the gas station to get drinks and snacks and whatnot. And this is where things started to get real weird. The night attendant was blasting uncensored tracks from Limp Bizkit and Korn. In retrospect, it isn't all that weird for a bored late-night clerk to play his music loud during a shift, I suppose. But it did nothing to help the unease that we felt for sure. When we came in, there were 5 or so of us, he politely turned the music down. Our trumpet player went to use the restroom and found that it was locked. A moment later, a girl came out. She wasn't wearing a uniform, so she must have been another customer. Both the attendant and this other customer were friendly to all of us at first, asking us welcoming questions like where we were headed and about the tour and whatnot. But soon, the questions turned from welcoming to strangely pointed. Both people asked us things like, so would you describe your hair as like brown or black? That's a nice tour van. What's its year, make, and model? Your name's Bob? Well, what's your last name? We got what we needed, though, and we left the store. The girl had become chummy with us and followed us out, asking more questions. We remained friendly, but when we all got into the van, we expressed a mutual sentiment of, let's get the hell out of here. We drove back to the highway and chalked the whole experience up to just late-night small-town weirdness. I was done for the day too, so I just curled up on my seat and I started to doze off. And the next thing I heard was a loud thud and a what the fuck from our drummer who was driving. My waking brain thought immediately that he had fallen asleep at the wheel or hit an animal or something. I was further confused when he sped the van up instead of slowing down or pulling over. As my grogginess subsided, I realized that all of us had been also sleeping, aside from our drummer or driver, and we were all equally confused. Our trombonist was in the front passenger seat and saw that there was a huge crack in the van's windshield right in front of him. Our guitarist was in the seat behind the driver's seat, and he was trying to brush something out of his hair. Our trumpet player was screaming, "What happened? What's going on?" And then the driver said, some dude on the side of the road just threw a fucking boulder at us. But we were driving well over the speed limit at this point, and we were all awake with a general panic. Our trumpet player picked up her phone and dialed 911. She explained the situation to the operator and was only on the phone for about a minute before she said, "No, we're not doing that. We're going to keep driving." I couldn't hear the operator on the other end, but our trumpet player's face suggested that this person did not like the answer. The call ended, and she explained that emergency services wanted us to pull over immediately and wait for the cops. Hell no, we said to that. The dude who threw the rock obviously wanted to cause us harm, and was probably planning on his throw to shatter the windshield instead of just cracking it. He wanted the van to stop so that he could rob us, or maybe worse. When things de-escalated, we recounted what had happened with our drummer. He couldn't make out any details about the guy, other than he was tall, white, and looked homeless. We asked if he wanted to rest while someone else drove, but he said that there was no way that he was sleeping tonight and that he was fine to drive. The night went on as usual, and we made no more stops until daylight. We stopped at a car wash in a bigger OR city and vacuumed all the glass from inside of the van. We then made a video. It's actually on Facebook. And we spoke a lot about the whole experience in the next few days and realized just how weird the encounter in the gas station was. We didn't have any explanations, other than it was all just a little bit freaky, hills have eyes kind of thing, and we continued the rest of the tour. Fast forward to last year though, and I was talking to a musician friend of mine about the surreal tour stories, and she brought up the ghost town that her band had found while driving from CA into OR in 2017. Her story was very eerily similar to ours as well. Driving through the night, needed a pit stop, came to this small town that they didn't expect to find. When they got there, every building was boarded up on the doors and the windows. The gas station was there, but it was inaccessible. The only sign of human life were porta potties installed outside of the gas station. My friend described them as recently cleaned as well, which was weird. And a chill went up my spine when she told me this, and I immediately shared my band's story. I couldn't do a whole lot of research on this town, as I don't remember its name or its exact location, like I said. I did stumble across the rumoured concept of military-built and operated puppet cities where the Army or the Air Force will run a town as a front to hide weapons testing or other experiments. The towns act as a sort of buffer to civilian passerbys who might otherwise stumble onto some classified stuff. And quite honestly, I think this may have been what we experienced, since the gas station people were so interested in exactly who we were. Maybe a big white van driving through the middle of the night was just a little too suspicious for whatever operation to take lightly. I get that. But the attack on the van and the emergency services telling us to stay put could have been an effort to keep us in the town to interrogate us, but I doubt the military would resort to throwing large rocks at cars when there are safer methods to detaining people, right? I also considered that the town could have been a home to a cult or maybe a drug ring or something. But all I know for sure, though, is that it was a series of increasingly odd experiences that made a story I will tell forever. So I'll start by saying that I personally did not witness or experience this, but the story comes from a close family friend whom I consider reputable and quite honest. Personally, I'm rather skeptical when it comes to most paranormal activity, but I do believe this story because of the man who told it. So, as a little bit of background, my father was a police officer for 25 years through the 80s and 90s. His best friends were mostly officers, so growing up I always met and was around cops. Some of my father's cop friends were annoying and rude, and some were really squared away nice guys. One in particular, though, was my favourite. I won't use his real name, so I'll just call him Bob. Bob was one of my father's closest friends and beat partner for a long time. He was an older African-American man from New Orleans. He was polite, had great mannerisms, and carried himself confidently. My father used to say that he was the most honest cop that he'd ever worked with and had solid integrity and a lot of bravery too. Now one night, my father and him worked on an off-duty at a local event, some sort of a carnival or fair or something. I can't really remember exactly, but there was a clown there. My father told me the entire night Bob was acting really strange, acting uncomfortable, quiet, and really shy. When my father asked him what was wrong, Bob said, "I just hate clowns, always have." My father started poking fun at him for being scared of the clown, and he said Bob just stared at him with this look that he had never seen him do before, like he was genuinely afraid. So my father asked why, and this was Bob's story. So Bob grew up in New Orleans, and when he was a child, his mum took him to stay at his aunt's house for a few weeks. Bob said that he didn't care much for his aunt. She wasn't mean to him or anything, but he always just got a strange vibe when around her. Like, she sort of carried an evil aura around her. His family used to joke that this aunt was involved in voodoo and black magic, but they mostly just said these things in jest. His time at his aunt's was largely uneventful, but with the exception of a strange rule that she had. He was not allowed in the kitchen. Bob didn't understand why, but he followed it. On some nights, Bob claimed that he heard his aunt talking to people in the kitchen at really odd hours, and in the mornings he would question his aunt if she had friends over, and she would say that she didn't. His aunt had a thing for dolls as well, and she had them just everywhere around the house. And he absolutely hated them. He said that whenever he passed by cabinets displaying them, he always felt like he was being watched. But she had this one doll that she always carried around and protected like a treasure. And you probably guessed it by now, but it was a clown doll. He said that his aunt loved this thing and always took it with her around the house, caring for it like it was a child. He didn't understand why. It was ugly and horrible looking, and he was frightened by that one the most. Now, one night he said that he smelt his aunt baking something sweet and conversing with someone in the kitchen. He got excited and ran into the kitchen without thinking about his aunt's rule, and when he ran in, he saw on the counter the clown doll. It was moving its mouth and speaking to his aunt in a man's voice. The clown turned its head and looked at Bob. His aunt turned around frantically and scolded him out of the kitchen, and he said that as his aunt rushed him out of the kitchen, he heard the clown doll laughing. After that night, he never left his room and barely slept there. His aunt claimed that he was imagining seeing the clown talk. He never went back after the incident, too. My father, who was a big-time paranormal skeptic, believes Bob, and he said that he'd never seen Bob's eyes or body language display just so much discomfort and fear. He looked my dad square in the eyes and said, "I know what I saw, and I know how it sounds, but I'm telling you, it happened. That doll was alive." Whether you choose to believe it or not, I do, because I know Bob, and he's just not the kind of guy to make something up or claim something that he wasn't for sure about. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this story, and if I get any more info, I'll let you guys know. So, I was a patient of Larry Nassar. While my story is not even comparable to his victim stories, I still find this incredibly creepy to look back on. I don't really tell this story to many people because some have thought that I'm lying or just wanting attention, which is so far from the truth. Anyway, I was a freshman in high school. My orthopedic surgeon referred me to Larry for him to look at my hips to see if my issues were hip-related. My mother came with me to this appointment, and when we came into the room, he introduced himself to both of us. He had a team of interns with him too, and I remember him feeling my hips and my buttocks and just being overall kind of touchy. Obviously he was there to look at my hips, so he had to touch me to examine them, but he seemed to kind of touch and grab my butt more than necessary. He also had me get up and walk so that he could examine my movements. I could feel his eyes on my butt the whole time, but again, he was examining my hips, so how do I really know what he was doing? He did a couple of adjustments, though, with my hips, and then sent us on our way. The moment that strikes me the most, though, when looking back on this appointment, is that when my mother and I stepped out of the room, I looked at her and said, "I don't ever want to see him again." My mum remembers this moment too, because she could see how strongly I felt about not seeing him again. Looking back, it's kind of crazy that my young self felt like that. My intention, too, is not to discount the victims in any way, and I'm really unsure how to tell this story without sounding arrogant or offensive. When I learned, though, that he was charged with all of these assaults, I was shocked to say the least. Everything did make sense, though, when I looked back at that appointment. I think about the other girls often, and I hope they found peace and strength in their healing. As for Larry, I hope he rots in hell.